You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Spirit Dimension with your host, Kerry Greenaway, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the Spirit Dimension. My name is Kerry Greenaway. It is a Sunday evening. Unfortunately, my guest that I had lined up is very poorly at the moment and is unable to join us. So we send all the best wishes to Robert Murch, and I will get him on later on when he feels a little bit better. However, I have a cracking show lined up for you tonight on a Sunday evening. I have the lovely Kaz Rooney, one of the Parasearch presenters, with me. Good evening, Kaz. How are you?
Good evening, Kerry. I'm good, even though you dragged me out of my bed again.
I have a habit of this, don't I?
Yeah, it's all good.
And I've got the lovely Ashley Mortimer as well. Good evening, Ashley.
Oh, good evening, yes. You've not dragged me out of my bed because I'm still in it.
I've dragged you out of the pub, I believe.
No, the bath.
Pub, bath, bed, you know. I drag these people out everywhere.
We're setting the tone again early, aren't we?
Oh, very early. Very, very early. That's bad, isn't it, guys? Three-way. Hashtag. Anyway.
I said setting the tone, not lowering it, Kerry.
Started already.
Anyway, my beautiful people. So I thought we'd start off because this is like a real off-the-cuff kind of show because, as I say, I thought I'd have the lovely Robert Murch, but as I say, he's poorly. So this is a real off-the-cuff kind of show, guys. So this kind of discussion could go anywhere. But I thought we'd kind of discuss a little bit about universal energy, which has been, oh my God, how all over the show has universal energy been recently?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Roller coaster, I feel.
Ashley actually has an interesting point about, I mean, it's been so up and down lately. It's like you're on a high and then all of a sudden you've got nothing but problems. That's the way it's been for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, I have to say this year has been absolutely bonkers. Do you not think?
It has been. Seriously, I don't know what's going on this year.
Is it settling down? Is it settling down now, do we feel?
It better I do.
Ashley, what's your take on universal energies at the moment?
Well, I mean, we say that, don't we? We go in these sort of biorhythmic patterns and then we'll say, oh, isn't everything terrible? This year's been awful and this year's been good. And we've had a good summer weather-wise and everybody's been happy. But, I mean, I remember, I think 2017 was the year everybody died, wasn't it? It was the year that lots of celebrities passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everybody seemed to have... And I think it focuses the mind. And I think once we latch onto something, we then kind of mould the reality around to keep noticing things that add into that. So I think maybe we should go around telling everybody it's a happy, jovial, naughty, mischievous year this year, isn't it? And then everybody will agree with you. And if you tell people things, they tend to agree with it. But it does go in patterns. It is ups and downs, and life is a roller coaster. And you just got to ride it, as somebody said.
Riding it like a bomb.
I think that was Ronan Keating. He said life is a roller coaster and you've just got to ride it. It was Ronan Keating, wasn't it?
It was.
It was.
Life
And it
is a
wasn't you, was it,
roller
Karen?
coaster.
It was another radio show. They talked to me, and the producers had talked to me before the show, and we talked a bit about this, that, and I think it was, you know how they do when you've never been a guest on a show, they ring you up in advance, and they test you by sort of having a chat with you to sort of see whether you're going to be loquacious or whether you're going to swear and that sort of thing. And I'd mentioned life being a roller coaster, so they opened the show with exactly that song, and I thought, someone's paid attention. And then off we went. So it was kind of good. It was okay. So I don't know. It surprised me by playing it. I don't know.
So do we actually think then that we're coming off that roller coaster and settling down for a bit? Because it's been a bit bonkers for, this year has been quite extreme, I would say. But last year was up and down as well. It's almost like a building roller coaster, if you're going to use the analogy. I mean, like last year we thought it was roller coastery. This year, last year had nothing on this year. The year before was a little bit easier. Do we think we're coming off the back of that, or do we think that we're still in the throes of that? Because I actually feel that we're off the worst of it. I'm not saying it's over. I'm saying we're sort of like coming off the peaks of it, shall we say?
Well, it's only a phase, isn't it? I mean, we all look at our own lives. I think I've been on a roller coaster ride I've been in a phase for about 39 and a half years probably. But it is only a phase. It'll end. But funny enough, I was talking to somebody this afternoon. I've had a very good day. I've been away in London. I've been meeting I might as well tell you the story. I've been meeting an author whose book I read when I was a teenager, just looking into the occult and witchcraft and magic and things. And I've been fortunate enough to meet her this afternoon, and we've sat and spent the afternoon talking about magic and witchcraft and things. And one of the things that we were saying is that life it has these patterns, and it goes round in these cycles and circles. And really, the longer in the tooth you get as a magician or as a witch, then we're both agreeing with each other that you kind of tend to meddle less and just surf it a bit more. You tend to once upon a time, it was the moment that you had the first bit of bad luck, you tripped over or something, then you're straight into the incense and candles and let's get this magically sorted out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've found as the years have gone on, I've tended to be a lot less inclined to stir the pot. And I think however much I imagine the universe is not doing what it should, the universe itself has probably got a better imagination than me, and it's probably a hell of a lot better at it than I am at working out what should be happening. So it's more a question of figuring out how to ride the waves and surf them and ride the roller coaster than it is to rail against it. Because your choices, I mean, if you want to use the roller coaster analogy, your choices are pretty straightforward. You can either throw your hands up in the air and scream to go faster and go for it, or you can sort of crouch on the floor and clutch onto the bar and hold on and hope that it's over soon. Yeah. But either way, the result is the same. It's still going up and down those tracks and over those bumps. And, there's some, I suppose, there's no point trying to fight it because you can't kind of get off halfway through. You just can't. So I think it's a question of learning to be wise enough to ride the waves a bit and just see where it goes. And obviously, the longer around you spend on the planet, then maybe the more you've seen it all before. And it's the new experiences, it's the sudden turns that get you, even if it's not a very sharp turn or a very sharp dip. It's when it's something, because that was something else we were talking about today, that it's been a long time since something new that's out of my experience has happened. Do you know what I mean? When you're young, virtually everything is the first time. Your first driving test, you learn to drive a car, you get married, you meet your first girlfriend, all those things that happen to you for the first time. But as you get older, there's far fewer first times to have, if you know what I mean.
No, I agree
and
with
then
you.
Maybe, and you kind of get then into that nice smooth rhythm pattern, and then when it does jolt, because life does, no matter how, I imagine no matter how old you are and no matter where you get to, then there's always going to be a jolt. Then it can perhaps catch you a bit harder when you're not expecting it.
Yeah, I think no matter how well you plan stuff, there's always going to be, like you say, that jolt, that curveball that comes and hits you, and you're like, oh, well, how I didn't expect that. kind of moment.
I love the way you refer to it as the universal energy. I mean, I suppose it is Sunday, so we are, songs of praise evening. And if, as a person of religion, and I've sat on all kinds of religious councils and things like that as a pagan and Wiccan representative, it's very easy to turn and blame the gods.
Sorry, this is so not a songs of praise moment. I can't think of 3 people that would not be watching or doing the songs of praise moment.
I was doing a radio interview on a Sunday, and the presenter said to me, "This is not a songs of praise moment," and in a funny way, it really
kind
was.
of is, yeah, kind of is, but in a completely different way to the songs of normal praise.
No, I think what I meant was that I was really segueing into the idea of let's blame the gods for everything.
Yeah, let's blame them. Yeah, let's blame the gods.
Do you remember those old, sort of 1960s and 70s films where the Jason and the Argonauts type films, and there was always the gods sitting in Olympus around a pool or pushing little pawns and pieces around on a board. Let's throw this at him.
Yeah.
And I must admit, as a religious person, I do have that kind of vision in my head, and I think when a situation crops up, I do kind of look upwards and go, which one of you is it? Is it the one in the corner who's just woken up and looked at all the others having and thought, let's get that Ashley Mortimer and let's push him around the chessboard a bit?
I have to say, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I have to go. I go more with that analogy than I do the one big god that sits there and
somewhere up there. There's a giant Peter Ustinov in a stupid toga pushing me around the chessboard, and actually that's quite comforting. I find that quite a comfort. That thought, that kind of reduction to comedy of that, I can live with that. Perhaps he's just put his big fat clumsy fingers in the wrong place, or he's tripped over and. They didn't mean to give me oh no, not the Hydra again. The teeth of the Hydra.
I actually have a question for you two then. So with all these things going on and being pushed around chessboards and whatnot, do you actually think there's a bigger plan to it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's for a reason?
Yeah.
Yes, for the cruel amusement of the gods.
apart from
that one.
Apart from for the cruel amusements of the god.
They don't need any further reason than that. Well, Kerry knows. It's a favourite quote of mine. My high priestess said to me once. She said, "You know that the gods' sense of humour is akin to their sense of subtlety, don't you? And both of them involve poos in the swimming pool. Yeah. And it's that kind of. That's how they are. It does seem that way. It's not very subtle. And maybe there's a plan. Yeah, but maybe there isn't, and it doesn't really matter either way because you still got to ride the wave, and you still got to, get the net out and fish them out the swimming pool.
I literally.
There's a terrible analogy. Shall we go back?
It's a really bad analogy. However, I've heard a life coach use the shit soup. She uses the shit soup. She goes, no matter how amazing your soup can be that you make, one bit of shit in there will turn into a bad soup. You know what I mean? That was Kerry Hales.
You've done it now, haven't you? Songs of Praise evening, and you said the S word.
I know. But Kerry Hales, she's a life coach. We've had her on Parasearch before now, and her analogy of her shit soup analogy is just awesome. And if you've not heard it, then go back and listen to that show because it was the best analogy of life that I think I can. that I could ever conjure up, and it was like you can.
What's the point? What's the point?
The point is,
no matter how beautifully cooked it is, how perfect the ingredients are in the seasoning, it takes one
piece
bit of crap
of shit
to
spoil the whole thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's whether or not you allow that piece of crap to enter is whether or not your soup turns out to be amazing, or whether or not it turns out to be shit soup, basically. But it's you the cook.
Then you won't get the lumps.
Exactly, it's you, the cook, who has control of that.
That's actually a good analogy. I like that.
I know. I love the. I have to say, I love
the
shit soup analogy. It's awesome. And so that's Kerry Hales. Big shout out to her. But I have to say, from my perspective, I do think everything happens for a reason. I don't think you have to like it when you're going through it, but I think it puts you on certain pathways. And when I look back over my life, bearing in mind I'm 48, I've had a few years on this life. Whenever I've thought, this is an incredible, awesome idea, I really want this, right? And I'll go back to when I was, I come out of a bad situation and I wanted to join the Navy. I know. Let's just have a little laugh at that one before we even begin. Why I thought this was a good idea, I don't know. But at the time, I thought, it's a good idea. I went to join the Navy. I passed all the exams. I passed absolutely everything. And it came down to a physical abnormality that I have. I have two. My eyesight, I'm very short-sighted, and I have a skin condition called psoriasis. Okay. And so I kind of assumed that my eyesight would be the problem. Anyway, I passed all the exams and I did the physical and I passed it with all flying colours. And the guy who interviewed me, the lieutenant supervisory head bod kind of guy, was like, "Oh, God, you're going to be so great." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm going to be awesome." And he said, "But we've got to do your physical." And I was like, "I'm going to so pass this crap," right? And I passed the physical, as in, I could run the amount of miles they wanted in a certain amount of minutes and lift my 10 times my body weight and all that crap, because I trained really hard for it. And then he went, "Right, well, there's two things. Your eyesight is not a problem." And I was like, "Great. That's the one thing I'd fail on." I'm so got this gig. You know what I mean? And he went, "But your skin." I was like, "Oh, right, okay. Well, we've got to send you to the Gosport hospital person who's got to check it out." So it's like, right, it's not that bad. It's going to be fine. So got this. I travelled all the way to Portsmouth, right? Saw this guy. He took one look and went, "Nah." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Nah." I was like, "But why?" He's like, "Because you've got psoriasis." I was like, "Well, couldn't you have told me that over the phone? I travelled all the way to Gosport, for fuck's sakes." Oh, I've dropped the F word as well. Oh! Sorry, everybody.
In a funny way. Jesus. Do you think Jesus ever said the F word?
I kind of think he might have done a few times.
You know exactly who you sound like when you do that.
I sound like Billy Connolly imitating a vicar, don't I?
No, you sound like R.M. Jolly. And
yes, that's the
guy.
That's the fella.
Oh my God.
Like.
Do you know what? I think that he's the guy that Billy Connolly emulated when he used to do it, because that was it's the Billy Connolly classic English vicar thing, and he used to say that. He said there was that. He does that wonderful. I mean, it has me in stitches when I hear it again. And he does that bit where he says, and because they all talk. He said they all talk like that, don't they? They all talk like that, and they do. And he said, so I was I took my son, Nigel Jr., to a football match. And I said, "Nigel, did you enjoy the football match in the first half?" And he said, "Yes, Daddy, it was very thrilling." And he said, and then Nigel looked at me and he said, "Daddy, did Jesus play for Tottenham Hotspur?" And in a funny way, he did. And it was that vicar story that always ends with, "In a funny way, he did." And it's lovely. I've got, actually, funnily enough, I've got a very good friend. I've got a number of very good friends in the church, actually. But one particular chap I'm talking about, I won't mention names to save blushes, but he does have a very gentle, vicarly voice. And I know another guy who's a druid, and he's actually quite a well-known druid, and he has a very gentle voice as well. And when the two of them are together, I absolutely love it. I could sit for hours while they do the RM Jolly to each other. And they discuss, the state of the universe and everything, and they talk about things, intellectual, occult matters. And they discuss things, and they both of them have such a lovely, gentle voice, And do you know? I think you're quite wrong there. I think God really does exist, I really do, and it's just lovely. I'm sorry, I'm finding humour in that, and I'm not poking fun at anybody. I'm really not. Just as I don't think Billy Connolly was. But you're right, and you've reminded me it was RM Jolly, and that's filled up another 5 minutes of the show, and we're
anyway, back to my story. Anyway, oh my God, come on, guys. Sorry. So anyway, I've been at this hospital even, and come out, and I'd had my dreams crushed because I wasn't going to be able to join the Navy. Anyway, the funny part of this is, on the way over to the hospital, you have to go on a ferry. And you don't pay on the way over, but you have to pay on the way back. Well, I didn't realise this. So I've
it's a brilliant system, that, isn't it?
My God, yeah, because I'd run thinking I'll catch the next ferry. It was just pulling out. The bloke on the boat was going, "You can jump this. Have you got your ticket?" And I'm literally on the verge of jumping. How I didn't jump is a miracle in itself, because I was like, tickets? Oh my God. I could have ended up in the Solent. I didn't. It was like it was like a bit of like on the verge, oh my God, I'm about to jump, but I haven't got a ticket kind of moment. I didn't jump, didn't get on the ferry, went back, bought my ticket and stuff. But I didn't join the Navy because of this problem that I've got. And I was like so disappointed. But if I had, how different would my life have been if I had joined the Navy? Would I have ended up on the pathway that I ended up on? I wouldn't have.
No, doubt it.
Would I have met people?
I mean, how different would your life have been if you jumped and landed in the Solent? I mean,
it was, yeah, that would have been a moment, that's for sure. Of all the embarrassing moments in my life, that would have been a highlight.
Well, we're getting kind of scientific, aren't we? We're getting a bit Schrodinger here, really.
We're getting a bit sliding doors moment.
Everything has cause and effect, and every moment affects every other, and every choice and every decision you make. You know, the fact that you, I don't know, decided to go back and put your scarf on before you went out might mean that you didn't get knocked down by that bus that was coming in.
It's a very sliding doors moment, isn't it? If I had got into the Navy, how would my life have planned out? As it happened, that was obviously preordained way before I hit that moment, because obviously I got born with the condition that I've got, rather than...
Yeah, you didn't choose.
I didn't choose that. I chose to try, but I didn't get it. But that was preordained before I even went for that decision, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
That's what you're saying, isn't it? That's what you're saying. You're saying that before you even went for that interview, you were destined not to be able to join the Navy, and you just didn't know it.
Even though I'd passed everything, it was something completely out of my control as to why I didn't get into the Navy. And there was, as I say, I thought, actually, my eyesight, because I'm very short-sighted, that's why I wear glasses, you know, I thought that would be my downfall on the joining the Navy part, but it actually wasn't. It was something completely out of my control that happened at birth, because it's a genetic condition that I have. I blame my parents for that one.
I'm so sorry. No, I just had this wonderful image of you know, of the short-sighted Captain Kerry steering the ship in the wrong direction, and you know, hailing the other ship, going.
Or losing my glasses in the middle of the night, going, "Where the hell am I swimming to?"
If you don't move from our course, then we'll be forced to torpedo you. And then the reply going, "You can try, but this is the lighthouse." You know.
Yeah, at that moment, we've all seen that on Facebook, haven't we?
That would have been you. That's probably what's been.
I know.
The skin condition saved you from being
exactly. This could be why I didn't get in the Navy. Don't start me laughing, because I won't stop. Right, but it's a sliding doors moment. Right. Anyway, back on track. So universal energy has been a bit roller coastery, and we're talking about life choices and, you know, whether or not it's destined for you to go in a specific direction or not. And this universal energy is putting you into situations you wouldn't necessarily have gone down beforehand. When you work, as we all do, well, the three of us anyway, rituals and incantations and manifestations and affirmations, how much does the universal energy then impact on those? You know, we talk about good and bad and stuff like that. So how much does the universal energy impact on those kind of situations? Bearing in mind, we've just come off the back of an equinox and a full moon, which was incredibly powerful.
It depends on your intentions. I still say this, it depends. We can do all the rituals we like, but your intentions play a big part of it. How the universal energy interprets that intention could be a different way. To be fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you normally ask that. Normally, that question, interviewers normally ask that question the other way around, and they say, "So, come on, you know, how much does your ritual impact on the universal energy? How good is magic? Does it work? Can it really change the world?" And it works both ways. You've asked that question ever so interestingly, to say how much does the universe impact on your rituals, on your on your decision-making process, on your attempt to manipulate and stir it. And, well, when we're back again to that, you can't know, can you? Because unless you can sort of peel away to a multi-universe interpretation, so, parallel universes, if you'd chosen otherwise, you can't really see what that would have been, and you didn't choose that path, you chose this one, so the only one you can know about is the one you're on. Now, I mean, I would say to my students who are looking at studying witchcraft, and we've talked about this loads of times, haven't we, Kerry, where I've said, people come along imagining that it's all going to be swords and candles and pentagrams and, clouds of smoke and sulfur fumes, and it's not. It's about learning to be a good person and learning to be a decent human being who's in, if not in control, but in the developing the capacity to see how the world is showing and evolving around you and how you are journeying with it. And then you're looking at your position in things, and you're starting to. It's not about acceptance. It's not about kind of lying down and going, "Oh, let the universe do its thing. It's going to anyway." But sometimes when you're fighting against the tide a bit, then pardon the pun, and given your previous story, but I think when you're fighting the tide a bit, you kind of have to stop really and say to yourself, "Why am I doing this? Why am I fighting? Is there a current driving me in another direction? Is there another way of going down this river?" So that I don't go over the rapids, or so I don't disappear over the waterfall or fall in the Solent. And I think it's that wisdom to choose to pause for a moment before you make a choice and before you leap, and look before you leap and just have a think again before you do something. And maybe that's something that you don't have to be a witch or an occult practitioner or a ritualist or a ceremonial magician. I think that's just something that some of us develop further as we get older. And some of us just get more rash and more crazy and more kind of, oh, screw it doesn't matter, does it? Let's go for it. Let's jump in this roller coaster ride and do this bit instead.
I think it depends on how you work, in all honesty. I think for the mindful practitioner, we'll use the word practitioner, I think you take into account, depending on how you work, because there are certain spells that you should do on certain days of the week and under certain astrological conditions and all that. If you buy into that methodology, then that's quite relevant. I have to say, any manifestation work that I've done recently, I've had to be very mindful of that, depending on the astral tides, because it has been so roller coastery.
Right.
Okay.
Right. If you are working purely in an energetic way, you have to be very mindful of self and how you feel regarding your inner workings.
Mm.
And if you don't buy into any of that, then you just do it whatever, because you're that, woohoo, let's go for it, whatever kind of moment. Yeah.
But here's the thing. I mean, no matter how mindful you may be or how much you pay attention, there are things that are going to come up in everyday life. None of us are saints.
Yeah.
Absolutely none of us are saints. I mean, there's going to be somebody or something or someone who has upset you sometime in the week, and you're going to be cursing upside down. And I've done it. And then sat and went, oh, wish I hadn't done that. Because we do react in a human way, but not everybody is saints.
No,
that's very true.
What you're saying there, so you're talking about a matter of proportion or how many times things happen. So what you're saying, because we want, I mean, I can see we've steered back to black and white magic and the nature of good and evil. Yeah. So I mean, people say, oh, he's such a good person. He's a saint. He's a great person. But, good people do bad things sometimes, or make bad choices, or make silly decisions. And and I've heard people labelled so frequently. I've heard people labelled, "Oh, that guy, he's this and he's that. He's a terrible person." And you think, probably not really. He's that particular person is probably he's probably quite a nice bloke. He's a really nice guy, and he just did something stupid once, or he did something foolish. And he probably regrets it. Now, I mean, I guess that might be the means for whether someone's a good person or not. To say, having done something that was patently a bad idea or harmful to others, do they look back with regret? Because if they do, then you can kind of class them as perhaps that mitigates a bit the fact that they have remorse. And then it gets into some very interesting areas about how society treats criminals. Does the fact that somebody has remorse for their crimes, does that actually make mitigate in some way later, because you can't go back and change stuff.
No, it only affects your own soul. If you have regret for something you've done, you can't change what you've done.
And then really, I suppose the witch's question.
But who are you as a person on this physical plane to judge that person? That's not up to you. That's up to a higher power. You judge yourself, and that's up to a higher power to judge. So what you've done is you could have the most regret in the world, about something you've done. Okay, talk about somebody who's done the worst crime in the world. They could have the utmost regret. However, people on this physical plane that we talk about are still living with the consequences of what you've done. So you can regret that as much as you want to, but that doesn't change what you've done. On a higher self-thinking or a higher plane, when you move on, you still have to answer for that. You don't excuse yourself just because you've got regret, because your regret doesn't impact the impact it's had on other people. So it doesn't matter what you feel on this physical plane against somebody else. When you move on, that's where it becomes important for your own soul purpose, your own soul journey. You regret, you can do the most heinous crime, but on this physical plane that we live on this day-to-day plane that we live on, it doesn't change anything. You've still done it. You've still impacted other people's lives with that.
There's two questions there, isn't it, that raises? And one of them is there a big difference between regret and remorse? And why do you regret it? Do you regret because a lot of people who express regret for the harmful things they've done, really, when when they pry into their own psychology, and I'm sure we've all done it at a minor level, you pry into your own psychology and you suddenly you make this realization, actually, I regret getting caught. Not so much that I don't regret doing it or I don't care. It's more sort of, I'm sitting here wallowing and going, oh, no, I've done a bad thing. And actually, you have to, you can question yourself, you can play the game on yourself and say, had I not been caught, would I be sitting here regretting it in quite the same way as I am now? Had I not been found out for that bad thing, if no one had noticed, then would it be all right? And that's kind of, it gets quite philosophical then. And then the other question is assuming for a moment that somebody acknowledges that they've done a harmful or bad thing, and they are genuinely remorseful and feel sorry for what they've done and want to make right and make amends and do something. I mean, that's the question. What do you do about your remorse? Do you just sort of go, oh, well, I've acknowledged I did something bad, so come on, let me off, everybody? Or do you try to do something positive afterwards,
You need to atone for that.
I agree.
You need to atone for that.
It depends on the circumstance. I mean, it does depend on the circumstance, because there are some things you can't come back from.
Yes.
It depends on the circumstance. You can't come back from certain things you've done. And
do you think so, Kerry? Is there an absolute part to your journey through human existence, through incarnation, where you can do something in your life that's so damnably horrible that you've done that really there's no way that, I mean, your life is over then, isn't it? Your life has hit that point where there's nothing you can do for the rest of your days that's going to put right what you've done. And we're talking about crimes like murder or deliberate murder or premeditation, serial killing.
Premeditation. Okay, so let's name a few names here. So I think Fred and Rosemary West, there's no coming back from that. There's the other ones, Myra Hindley and the other guy, what's his name? Brady. Ian Brady. There's no coming back from that. You cannot atone for any of the sins you perpetrated in this physical life now. You cannot atone for that.
The problem with Brady, and I'm not so much Hindley, I mean, I know a little bit about that case, but the problem with Brady is that he never ever really had any remorse.
No, he never had remorse.
He really didn't ever have any sense of remorse or any sense of wishing to atone. In fact, he sat in prison all those years thinking of how he could continue to torture those poor families who lost their children.
But I don't think she did either.
I don't think she... I do. I've studied that. I used to be quite interested in true crimes. And
she put it across that she did.
Yes.
Yeah, she's very manipulative.
I don't think she had the
intellectual capacity. Yes.
I don't think she really understood that concept. I don't think she really understood it. I think Brady fully understood what the concept of remorse was and rejected it. Decided he didn't want to do that.
No, I disagree.
But I'm not sure she had quite the capacity.
No, I think she did. In all honesty, in my opinion.
And look at Brady. I mean, that poor woman went to her death still looking for her son.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Winnie. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and I
that
don't.
boy.
Winnie Johnson, and I really do not believe for a minute that he did not know where that boy is buried.
No, I agree, and I think there was some bit of him in his deep sadistic thing where he actually enjoyed the fact he knew she was out there feeling that way.
So I think in that respect, yes, in certain circumstances, on a day-to-day level, on normal people, you can, to some degree, you can atone for that. I don't know, you broke someone's heart, you feel bad, that kind of level. It's a minor level. But when you talk that level, there's no way you can atone for that. There's no way you can make up for that transgression.
Who decides that, Kerry? Who draws that line? Society, presumably. I mean, somehow we have to have a set of laws.
On the physical plane, society.
There are some crimes that we consider so heinous that there's no... I mean, I don't think if you took a poll, apart from that nutcase Lord Longford, I don't think anybody in this country, and I don't think it would have changed over time, would have ever said that Brady or Hindley should have ever had parole. They should have spent that. There's quite a lot of people said that the death penalty would have been the right thing in that instance. But, nobody would have let them out of prison. There's such a categoric case because they so inflamed the sensibilities of our nation and what we do and how we felt about that. So it's perhaps not a very great example.
To be fair, I think it's a great example because you can't come back from that. Because when you listen to the court case and you listen to that poor child, the tapes of that poor child that they took...
Polly. I believe it was Pauline. The tapes of Polly.
The young girl. You cannot come back from that. Her name
was Leslie Ann Downey.
Leslie Ann.
Leslie Ann.
You can't. How can you come back from that? You can't. If they had been paroled and they had been released, they wouldn't have walked this earth for that long because there's too many people would have been willing to put their own soul journey in retribution for that.
Right, can I bring something up here? Because there was an artist, I don't know if you will remember this. I think it was about 5 years ago, there was an artist done a black and white portrait of Hindley.
Oh, the mosaic.
Yeah, but he used his children's handprints to make this picture. And it got egged. I'm sure it got egged or something. It got totally destroyed. So isn't that kind of a bit twisted as well?
Yeah. Well, we're back to levels of sensibility.
Levels, exactly, it's levels.
There are some people who wouldn't find that offensive, who'd say, "Oh, well, art for art's sake," and every subject's up for it. And I've gone through a lot of. I've just lost a very good friend. My friend died, and I was just going to tell a story about him, which was something else, but I'll tell that in a minute. Okay. And he and I shared a very dark sense of humour. We found that humour is quite reductive to deal with our negative problems in our life, and we were talking about that earlier. But we had quite a dark sense of humour. If he could say something kind of twisted or even maybe a little bit outrageous, we would say that to each other. And I've got friends who are like that. But then I have other friends who I wouldn't dream of making the same sort of jokes in front of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's a matter of proportion and the level of offence that you take at someone else's remark. It's what is it that's offended you? Where is your there's a level of where it's reasonable to suppose somebody else will be offended. But that example you've just given, Kaz, that I'm sure there are probably quite a lot of artists who are unconventional artists out there who would look at it and say, well, look, it's a piece of art and everything's up for grabs. Yeah. And it's not bringing any children back, and it's not making fun of anybody or torturing anybody any further, and it's an iconic image that stirs up an emotion. And if anything, you might even be able to argue that by keeping that image of Myra Hindley, that chilling photograph, that awful photograph that the press have used all those years, it's setting into everybody's mind, we mustn't let this happen again in our society.
But isn't that what art's about? But that's what, to play devil's advocate, art is about that. It's about invoking an emotional response in the same way as when you do, and I know this is quite controversial, when you do kind of a ritual, it's about invoking an emotional response within yourself to manifest that reaction within the universal energy.
Yeah.
I guess that depends on what your ritual intent is.
Exactly, but we're back to intention.
It's your intention.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to play with those things. I was thinking about this earlier.
Intention is everything to me. To me, intention is everything.
So this is where we go back to heart, isn't it? Where your heart lays. Someone like Ian Brady, using an Ian Brady, being as we're talking in these terms, someone like Ian Brady, their intention, their heart is purely twisted and evil without conscience.
Yes.
Yes, callous without conscience, correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So someone like, I'll use myself because I know my heart, I know my intentions, and I will always work for the best, the good. Yeah. But don't we say that the best intentions are paved the way to hell?
Well, is that a reason not to have good intentions?
No, I think that's you shouldn't try. At least with the best intentions in the world, you should still try because you set out with that perfect, not perfect necessarily, but a good intention. But this is where you have to be very, very self-analytical in regards to pre-ritual or pre-manifestation or pre-work.
But
you have to be very aware of your own intention and your own motivation for doing that.
Well, if good intentions pave the way to hell, could that be personal hell?
Possibly. Yeah, because we've all done things for other people where it's not necessarily turned out to be a good thing personally.
Exactly. Personally, it's
well, that does bring you back to the whole, is everything preordained then, doesn't it? Doesn't that brings you back to that whole idea that however well-intentioned you are, the universe has already decided what's going to happen, and however much you keep your good intentions going, it's following a path.
But does that mean? But actually, does that mean you should stop or not do it?
No, that's not the case. No, it's not. And
you need to keep trying.
Exactly.
Dare I say this? So we're having a discussion in one of our witchcraft groups about personal development, and the question came up: all of this stuff about learning to respond positively to negative things and to not be absolute with yourself and not beat yourself up and to let things pass and all the rest of it, all this good stuff about finding your bliss and your joy. And somebody said, I think it was me. I was messing. I was playing devil's advocate. And I said, so all of this stuff, if you read these guidelines that we've got and that we've talked about, and this system for not letting things affect you too deeply and letting it run off you and all the rest of it. Actually, isn't this just a manual for becoming an ultimately, utterly selfish sod who doesn't care about everybody else's feelings? Oh. And this was the answer. It took them a while to figure out the answer, but the answer is that we have a moral code. And in witchcraft, our moral code is, and it harm none, do what you will. Yeah. So it's okay. It's okay to, you've got this not harming, not causing harm, and this judgment process that you go through before deciding to do something. Is it going to cause harm? Who's it going to harm? Me, the other person, or not? And because we've got that, then all that stuff works. But otherwise, you basically got, I had this horrible image of the craft of the wise, of this wonderful thing that I call Wicca and witchcraft that are now churning out all these sort of robots that go around not being affected by other people's feelings because they've been teaching themselves to stand at their own centre and stand in their own power. But for that moral guide, so I think that introduced the concept of morality to the way we live. And then morality is a sort of flexible thing as well. It's a bit malleable. Some person's morality is not the same as anyone else's.
But I think you go through a process before you do any kind of work or ritual or manifestation or any of that kind of work. I think you have to go through that process where you, first of all, you stand. If you're doing it for somebody else, you stand through judge and jury, and then you come off the back of that. So this is pre-ritual work that you have to go through. And I think this is where the mistake is made. They don't go through that process pre-ritual. And so you go into a phase. That's why if I have to do any of that kind of work, it's never an immediate thing. It's always a process that I have to go through before I even start thinking about doing a ritual for that purpose or that person or that situation. You know what I mean? There's a lot of pre-work. Where's my motivation? Where's my intention? What am I sitting in judge and jury? Where I go into this? How do I deal with this? What is my you've got to take yourself out of that process. And that is a whole ritual process that you have to go through before you even start thinking about wanting to go into that kind of work. There's a whole pre-work before you go into the work. And then so when you go into that work, you've already dissected a lot of that before you go into. So you know your psychological setup, you know where you're at. So you know your intention, and if you find yourself wanting or lacking or expecting a personal gain out of that situation, you don't do it.
Oh, it's the old. I mean, it's a sort of variant on the pros and cons psychology. When you're trying to make a decision, do I take this job or don't I? And you draw, you get a piece of paper and you draw a line down the middle.
Yeah.
And it's really the same thing. You're saying that you kind of you prejudge what the outcome might be and what the consequences of that are, and you operate. I mean, this is the phrase. This is carefully chosen phrase, but you operate in the best possible intention that you could have, given the information and situation as it stands, and you perceive it at the moment at which you choose to act.
Yeah, but you also have to take yourself out of the equation. Yeah,
and if you can sort of look back and say afterwards, well, that didn't work out very well, or that turned out really bad. But if you can still say to yourself, well, given the data I had at the time, the choice I made was as good a choice as it could have been at the time.
Exactly.
Then I can probably salve my own conscience, despite the fact that there's a trail of destruction behind, the last 6 months of my life.
Not necessarily. But the trail of destruction can be for you personally, but for the person the intention was for, it's worked out perfectly. So the good you've put out has equated, if that makes sense.
No good deed goes unpunished, is that what you're saying?
I think it depends on the circumstance. I think it very much depends on the situation.
Yes. And you've got to look as well, whatever you're asking for or putting out for, or you're setting your intentions for, whatever you're giving out, you're going to get back 3 times.
I mean, we say the universe is a very fickle thing. What you ask for, you get. So you have to be very, very careful what you ask for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah? It's a very fickle thing. And how many times have we said this? And we can't reiterate this enough in actual fact, because it's a very simple concept. But again, with simple concepts, it's actually very complicated to put into action. So what you send out there, you get back. So you have to be very specific what you ask for. What you ask for in any manifestation, ritual, spell, whatever, however you want to class that, you have to be very, very careful. But if the universe hasn't got that mapped out for you, then that ain't going to happen anyway.
Well, I mean, that would be a reason never to do anything, wouldn't it? I mean, there's a very good reason. If you don't want to get run over, don't ever go out of your house.
You can use that argument. You can't
go
live
too
like
far
that.
that way. No, you have. So, I mean, we're back to that idea of making a sort of an informed judgment call as to what's likely to happen. What are the likely consequences of my action? If I choose to do this, is that going to happen? You can't know what's going to happen, but you can make a pretty good judgment call as to what you think will be the consequences of things.
Uh-huh.
So we're back to a universe with consequences, because we do believe that our actions. So I suppose we've answered our question, haven't we? What impact does it have? The answer is it does have an impact, because we accept the universe is a universe with consequence to our actions.
Very much so.
Which means that we must believe that our actions can impact the universe.
It does.
It does, but you've also got to bear in mind, I mean, we can sit here and talk about intentions and looking at things, but we've all been in a situation where we've wanted to help someone or do something, and everything in your gut is saying not do it, and you've still done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit where you kind of...
There's a lesson in that.
There's that tipping point, isn't there? Do you do it? Don't you do it? Do you do it? Don't you do it?
Yeah,
there's a bit of your life where you choose those things. Yeah. And there's another bit where you must have been in that circumstance where you've sat down and you've done your pros and cons, and you've got this big list of cons and about no pros at all, or very flimsy ones. Yeah. And there's that moment where you realise that you think, however much I make this choice carefully and conscious, I'm actually going to do that anyway, aren't I?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean a leopard doesn't change its spots, but do you have that moment where you think, however much I think about this, however much I know what the best thing to do is and the right thing to do here is, I just kind of know myself well enough to know, oh God, I'm going to do that, aren't I?
Yeah, we've all had those moments, haven't we? Like and it's that moment where you sit there and you go, no matter what I do, no matter how I try and justify this to myself, I'm going to do it, and sod the consequence.
Well, now, and that does, I suppose now I can crowbar my story of my dead friend, my passed on best friend, Max, Kevin. When we met at university, we experimented with this kind of magic. We were doing some hefty magic stuff, and we were talking about philosophy all the time, but it was always with a sort of dark sense of humour and a bit of comedy. And so one day we came out of our flat, and there'd been some workmen doing some work on the student flats, and they'd left a door frame. And I was, looking at the door frame. Of course, as a student, the first thing you think is, can I drink it, or what fun can we have with it? If it's a traffic cone, it's going on your head, and you're running down the street like an idiot. People of my age look at you and think, "Oh, well, we didn't do that as students." Anyway,
yeah, you did.
Kevin, we got this thing. I mean, this illustrates him. I'm trying not to tell this story at his funeral tomorrow at his eulogy. But we got this door frame, and he said, in his usual kind of humorous, and I knew he was messing about sort of way, and he said, "That's not a door frame, mate. That's a portal into another dimension. Mm-hmm. If you go through that, if you step through there, you'll be in another universe, a universe that is an alternative universe. I think you should step through it." That was the wicked gleam in his eye. "I think you should step through it, Ashley. Go on, you get through it." And then just before we were messing about, and we had a drink and what have you. And then he said, "Oh, I better warn you, mate." He said, "When you go through there, you're going to be surprised, because you're going to think that you're still in this universe." He said, because it's going to look exactly the same, and you'll just think you've walked through a door frame. But let me tell you, the universe you've stepped into is in fact a complete altered dimension, and it's not the same as this one. And it's one in which all of your actions have no consequences.
Uh-oh.
And I thought of the cruel joke, because I could see what he was doing. He was going, you go through there, and having walked through that, and then you'll think that you're still in the same world and the same life. But you can do anything you want. Anything, mate. You could do anything and get away with it, because as soon as you step back. And it was those kind of sort of mental exercise games, those twisted sort of humorous things. He would have had me, I don't know, hitting a policeman or something. I don't know, whatever crazy thing I would have done. But that was it. And it was that mental experiment. What would happen? But it was that twisted humour of it. He was, what can I get Ashley to do now? And I loved him dearly, because he would have done. He'd have had me doing any, but it was that sort of, you'll believe that you're in the same dimension, but actually there are no consequences to your action. So in some ways, those fun games, those psychological games that we play, it was part of this conversation. It was part of shaping this wisdom that's come, down through the years of studying and things. I mean, I do consider myself, and as you do, Kerry, without any sense of arrogance or without any sense of ego, reasonably wise or a little bit learned or gaining a bit of knowledge,
Yeah.
And I also, at the same time, I also consider myself a complete fool. So it's fine,
Yeah, because we still, even in our years.
It does like sitting there, and maybe the listeners are imagining us all sitting around in an old folks' home, and here we are just yakking away. Oh, when I was young.
When I was a young girl, even to this day we make mistakes.
Yes, of course.
But are they mistakes when you see a positive influence, even if it's had a negative reflection on yourself?
Funnily enough, you did a program on it, and we did it with our friend Steve at
the Fool's Journey.
Fool's Journey, because that's exactly what the Fool in the tarot is all about. It's that inspired folly. It's that innocent folly that sets your foot on a path. Mm-hmm. That idea of innocence, in that sense, that it's okay, because without a journey where you could lose your innocence by acting innocently, you can't gain any wisdom.
True.
So you can be wise and foolish at the same time, and actually it's quite a wise course of action to do something foolish. It would have been ridiculous.
But you never learn if you don't exactly. If you don't take a step, sometimes in a naivety or with the best intentions in the world, you don't take that step. You never progress.
No, you can't. You can't avoid action. You can't avoid. Actually, funnily enough, I can't say any details, but I was helping somebody who's having some problems, and she was she seemed to me to be caught up in this idea of having to make a choice. And she hadn't really, I mean, I just planted the seed a bit and she came to her own conclusion. And it was the idea that it was excusable to yourself to choose not to do anything, to sit and let a situation develop a bit longer before anything happens. And she said, without having this conversation, my perception of this, my perspective would have been that if I chose not to do anything about this situation brewing in my life, I would have beaten myself up for not. Oh, you haven't done anything about that yet. And I try. We had this conversation where I sort of said to her, actually, if you've weighed it all up and chosen not to act, that's a valid choice. It might be null. It might be a bit of a neutral way of doing things, but actually, it's a perfectly valid choice to choose to do nothing.
I agree.
Or at least to choose to do nothing for the moment.
Yes. How many times have I said to Kaz, let it play out. Let it see how it plays out before you make a decision.
Exactly. She said that to me a lot.
Sometimes,
Does it work,
sometimes
Kaz?
it's better to do. Does it work?
Yeah, it does. Most of the time.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's better just to be me and do what I do.
That's right. It's that, you can't really judge that. Sometimes the inspired folly and just, I'm going over this cliff, I'm going through this, I'm going to just do it. Sometimes you've got to do that. And there's no real judgment call. Sometimes you have to go with the gut to do something and just go with it. But actually, it is to excuse yourself. Because our problem is that we allow ourselves to be frozen. We allow ourselves to be frightened by our own ego or our own shadow ego or the id or whatever. However, not Freud. The other fellow with the big book, Jung. Yeah, and that idea of what the voices in our head are telling us to do, the ego and the shadow telling us to do things, and sometimes it's okay to just ignore it all and just say, do you know what? I'm just going to stand still for a moment. You're not really standing still. You're actually moving forward and progressing. But it's a big lesson. Maybe that's a really good lesson. Perhaps just sometimes when there's a situation and you don't know which way to choose, don't choose either.
Yeah,
just sit there and wait.
Sometimes it's best to wait it out. And even in regards to universal energy, if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel quite right, sometimes it's best to wait just to settle down and then maybe do it on another day or another time or on the downside of that.
There's a lovely joke that illustrates the scientific or I would say the occultist's mind, and that's the guy that's on some sort of adventure quest. I don't know. You can imagine it being science fiction or something, and he comes upon a big red button that says "Do not press." Mm-hmm. So he presses it, and there's this massive bolt of lightning comes down and sort of makes a mess of him and all the rest of it. And the difference between an occultist or a scientist and a normal person is that the occultist or the normal person, is just fry, that's it. And the occultist just thinks, I wonder if it does that every time you press it. You know what I'm getting at, Kerry.
I so do. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. Oh my goodness, we went round the houses on that one. However, this is just the beginning of the Black and White Magic thing. Next time we come back, I'll have both Ashley Mortimer and Steve Ward talking about this particular topic. This was big.
We'll get his perspective on it.
We'll get his perspective because there's a very there's a different perspective on this. Anyway, we have got shows going out 5 nights of the week. Don't forget to join me on the Parasearch Radio group page for the live update of shows up and coming. If you've missed any of our shows, don't forget, pop over to our YouTube channel, Parasearch Radio. Excuse me. Click like, share, and subscribe. That's my son. Just should be in bed asleep, but he's not. God damn him. Also, on the Parasearch Radio group page at this moment in time, we have a competition. It is a rosary that I have made, a pagan rosary that I've made with my very fair hands. If you would like to enter, don't forget you have to be a liker of the Parasearch Radio group page and comment on that post. On that note, thank you so much for a very interesting show, Kaz. And Ashley, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed for putting up with me. It's been a pleasure to be here again.
No, it's an absolute pleasure talking to both of you again. And on that note, we bid you all a very farewell and a good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.